Hello everyone! I know it's been a few weeks since my last video, and for the next couple weeks, and maybe longer beyond that, I'm not really sure, I would not expect too many uploads, and I also would not expect them to be super long or super in-depth. I'm busy, there's a lot of stuff going on in real life for me, but I still wanted to get this video out. It's been a while since I've uploaded anything on this channel, so yeah, I got 6 albums to talk about today in short form reviews. Let's not waste any more time, except for the thing I usually say about, like, these are all just my personal opinions on these albums. So yeah, feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But anyway, let's get these reviews started with... Alright, we got a new album from Kaatayra, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I've heard of this artist before this. But I'm pretty sure this is the first time that I've listened to one of his albums. It's the solo project of Kehlani, I hope I pronounced that properly as well. And he's gotten quite a bit of critical acclaim for albums released as Kaatayra, and this one especially, which I've seen a shocking amount of acclaim for online. And apparently it's black metal, which is one of my favorite genres, so I had every reason to be really excited about this. And unfortunately, I'm not fully loving it as much as I feel like I should. And it's frustrating because I feel like I should really love this, especially considering it's got some excellent moments. Especially that long, intense passage throughout the first leg of the third track. It's absolutely beautiful. But a lot of the melodies and compositions feel kind of stale after a lot of long passages that don't evolve as strongly as I would have hoped. And sometimes the production can be quite messy, especially on the second track where the drums feel so disconnected from everything. Now, I'll mention that the lyrics are in Portuguese, so I had to translate them online, and I'm not sure how accurate the translations are. But based on those translations, my interpretation is that it seems to have some environmentalist themes, although I'm not totally sure. I definitely noticed a lot of mentions of water and a deep respect and appreciation for water, which makes sense considering how important it is. In fact, there's a lot of moments on this album where you can hear water in a stream. As for the details of the messages, I'm not totally sure. I mean, the album kind of reminds me of that Anthropoceno album that came out recently that I also reviewed, especially with the genre blending, but I just like the production there way more, and I was able to grasp a bit more meaning in the poetry and storytelling, which might be here as well, but it's just not resonating as much for me. That's just my opinion though, and again, there are some absolutely beautiful moments, and in a lot of ways this feels like it should totally be up my alley, but it's just not quite clicking, at least not fully. So it's a fairly strong 7 out of 10, I just can't quite call it great in my personal opinion. They Might Be Giants are an American alternative rock band whose music I've often seen described as geek rock. And I was aware of their existence before this, partially because I used to listen to one of their children's albums that they put out in the 2000s, but that was a long time ago. Recently, I decided to check out a few of their classic albums before going into this one, but I just did not have time for a full discography dive. And those 2 albums that I listened to, Lincoln and Flood, despite all the critical acclaim, just were not totally my thing, although I did mostly like them. And here, yeah, I'm not really wowed by this. And I am still curious to check out more of their classic work. They've been putting out albums for nearly 4 decades now. But this album here just feels like your typical quirky rock band album without really doing a lot to make the songs catchy or making the cringiness actually justified or charming. And I put that word cringiness in quotes because this type of thing doesn't actually have to be cringy. And I don't even think this album is particularly cringy, it's just kinda boring. I like the subtly haunting lyrics of Sleep's Older Sister. Get Down is an oddly fun story of an emergency alert. The whole idea of character flaw is kinda silly, and I mostly like the song. And when it comes to the music itself, I mean, there's some good grooves and melodies here and there, and sometimes it can fit the lyrics really well, like on Slow, with all the sudden realizations and rethinking of the world, paired with the really intentionally awkward music, which I would probably describe as melodic dissonance, I think, although I don't really know a lot about technical music terms, so I could be wrong. In fact, I'm pretty sure the song actually uses microtonality, although I'm not absolutely positive about that. So yeah, the album does have its redeeming qualities, and I'll even call it pretty good, I guess. But it's far from great, and even compared to those 2 classic albums I mentioned not fully clicking with earlier, I'd say this pales in comparison. The album feels like it's getting better the further into it you get, until right near the end we're suddenly hit with What the Cat Dragged In, which has some really awkward pauses and some of the weakest production choices here, and also just really dull writing that feels like the epitome of why this album is not better than it is. Although I do like the satire of the closing track, even if I wish the production were stronger on that one too. So overall, this album is a 6 out of 10 for me, and probably a fairly strong 6 to be honest. But while it's got its moments here and there, the vast majority of it is mostly just okay. I'm still curious to hear more of their classics though. It's been a weird decade for the Foo Fighters, starting with the tragic passing of their drummer Taylor Hawkins in 2022, and then a couple years later Dave Grohl's cheating scandal, which I don't know the full details of, so I'm not going to talk about it much here, but the point is, well, I'm happy for the band that they found a creative spark, and I can also say that I don't have nearly as much respect for Dave Grohl as a person that I used to, but I can still separate the art from the artist and review the new Foo Fighters album as usual. And while 2021's Medicine at Midnight was really underwhelming, but Here We Are in 2023 was really good, and this new album is not doing much for me at all. And honestly, I barely have anything to say about it. I have not heard every Foo Fighters album, but the best way that I can describe this is, it's a Foo Fighters album. Except without any of the good qualities that I was expecting. I thought maybe we'd at least get a couple bangers, but not only does the production not have the same punch to it as the best songs of theirs that I know, but there's not much in the way of interesting melodies, and Dave Grohl doesn't really bring the same epic vocal performances I've heard from him before. And when this album does go in a different direction stylistically than I was expecting, we get moments like the overly fuzzy title track that I honestly find kind of grating. And Spitshine a couple songs later is even worse. I guess I'll give credit to a few decent hooks here and there, like on If You Only Knew and Caught in the Echo. But even in these examples, I feel like they should be hitting a lot harder. So yeah, this is a really disappointing album, and I'm not going to spend any more time on it. 5 out of 10, and I would not recommend it at all. So believe it or not, I'm pretty sure this is the first time I've ever reviewed a Kehlani album, or even listened to a Kehlani album. I could be wrong about that, but I don't ever remember listening to one of their albums until now. So, as my personal introduction, well, it's overly long, it's slow, and you gotta be in the right mood to listen to it. It's often just the pretty typical kind of sensual R&B where the emphasis is largely on the production, which unfortunately is not one of this album's strongest aspects. But there are still redeeming qualities here. I like Folded as an obvious single. I'm pretty sure I remember hearing this one before too, it came out almost a year ago. And there are also some good features later in the album from Cardi B and Big Sean. Cruise Control is a good late album highlight, and You Got It has some of the best vocal melodies and layering, and it perfectly fits the vibe of the lyrics with wanting a partner to take control, and it's a great song. And I think the production mostly brings the right vibe, it's just that I wish there weren't quite so much emphasis on the percussion. So overall, I think the album's okay. Melodically, I wish it were a bit more interesting, and I'm not always the biggest fan of Kehlani as a singer, although they do absolutely own this in some of the best moments. Just in general, they kind of sound like a lesser Ariana Grande. But whatever, the album's not bad. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 because it's got its moments and has at least one great song, but I can't say I'm loving the album as a whole. I did not really expect to either, so I guess you could say it's about what I would have expected. I remember really liking Lip Critic's 2024 album Hex Dealer when it came out, although admittedly I have not gone back to it a ton since. And revisiting it in preparation for this, it's even better than I remembered it being. It's legitimately a fantastic album that blends genres incredibly well while having enough thematic complexity to really make it stand out and still hit really hard. And unfortunately, this one just is not doing as much for me. The main problem is the industrial rock production doesn't feel as carefully crafted here, and thus it doesn't hit as hard and sometimes can get a little grating, even if the same intensity is here. And when it comes to the lyrics, well, I don't think it's bad or anything. Apparently when lead singer Brett Kaiser's identity was stolen online, it inspired this record about digital era deception. I found that on the Apple Music description. And paired with some thematic overlap with their 2024 album, at least in the ways that I read it, it leads to an album that often seems to show a narrator fucked by systems and eventually spiraling out of control. Albeit without as much lyrical focus, unless you really read deeply into it, maybe, in which case maybe you'll get more out of it than I did. But honestly, it just feels a bit too cryptic for this kind of album, which could have benefited from more straightforward writing. Although I do like the closing track with its existential crisis, handled with such calmness and intensity at the same time. One of those examples where the music and lyrics work together to make the song better. And maybe it's just that I didn't spend enough time on it, I am very busy, but my bigger issue is that the music itself isn't as strong. I mean, there's some cool moments, most notably drumming with Izzy, which is quite different for Lip Critic and not what I was expecting. And there are some other unique musical surprises along the way, but not enough to really make this worth going back to much at all. It is good, and I'm curious to maybe revisit it before Lip Critic's next album and see if maybe it's grown on me, but I kinda doubt it will. 7 out of 10, not a bad album by any means, but I wish I liked it more. Alright, final review of the video, and here's a band formed 5 years ago who just put out their debut album this April, and apparently it's dream pop, clearly with a lot of shoegaze elements as well, and I thought it'd be worth giving a chance. And after a few listens all the way through, I'm not really on board, beyond thinking this is often kinda pretty, and the vocals are very pleasant, and I can appreciate some of the poetry for what it is. And on that note, the band's guitarist, Ben Easton, said that the album is about human consequences, and there's some respectable intentions here with conveying that message of how we all impact each other, as well as how we impact other creatures like birds. But I'm just not feeling much of a connection to this album, partially because the lyrics are not written in a way that really makes me personally get much out of it, but mainly because I find the music itself a bit drab. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty enough that I'll still call this album decent, but I don't think there's a lot of strong melodies or really a lot of firepower, even if some moments like Alma do pick up the pace a little bit, and usually for the better. I just wish there were a bit more firepower on this album, even in the mellower songs. I mean, the album is supposed to be mellow, and I've certainly heard this sound done much worse, but especially when you factor in some of the vocal production that can get kinda awkward, I'm not sure I can rate this higher than a 6 out of 10. It's certainly not bad, but I would not really go out of my way to recommend it. Although, that said, there's probably a large audience for this. I just probably won't remember it. Alright, now that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comment section what you thought of these albums and or what you thought of my video. Yeah, I'll probably be back soon with more mini reviews, but again, they might not be super in-depth. There might not be that many of them per episode, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll be back soon, and I think that's all I got to say for now.